O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations in our hearts be acceptable unto you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I'm conscious tonight that each of us in our own way have come from some place over the last few days, whether we've climbed hills or flown on airplanes, driven cars in the 401, come to gather with family, come to visit with a friend, perhaps have come to visit somebody who's ill. What I do know is that each of us has come into this place in this time, and we carry with us a story. And it's our story that bears scars and celebrations. And whether we know it or not, we've stepped into a story where we are getting to know some refugees in their own time, because that's what they were in that day. I am aware, after many years in ministry, that worshipers on Christmas Eve consist of this mixture of the excited faithful and the bored near relatives, and the dreamy mystery lovers. The first have particular moments that they anticipate, the choir's descant on O Come All Ye Faithful, or the youngster who reads the passage from Luke, that we also hear then Lioness's voice. The second may be listening long enough to laugh at a funny story if it comes early in the pastor's remarks. But the last are the ones waiting only for the chandeliers to be dimmed and the rising and the falling of silent night and the spread of candlelight through the sanctuary. The prophet Isaiah assures us that the people who walked in the darkness have seen a great light. Whether you gather to worship on Christmas Eve in the kind of idyllic country church that I served in northern Alberta back in the day, or in the cathedral of Metropolitan United in downtown Toronto, by midnight, I can tell you it's dark outside. And whether we think about what this light means or does not mean, somehow a live flame can elicit something we don't get from pageants or preaching or popular Christmas songs. And so people do seek out on their mobile Google Maps a place nearby to show up like this, if only for one service a year, just to hold a candle of their own. It's roughly 100 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem, according at least to the Google Maps, and it would take about 34 hours to travel it on foot, not counting any stops for rest. And of course, Google does not factor in the contingencies such as marauding bandits, deep rain-washed wadis cutting through the path, inns with no room or full-term pregnancies. But this long, wearying, unpredictable journey is, according to Luke, precisely what Joseph and Mary must undertake. It is not as though they have a choice. This is no vacation jaunt to the old home place. Caesar Augustus has spoken, and like it or not, everybody has to register in the town of their own ancestry. Joseph lives in Nazareth but has roots in Bethlehem, and that is that. Days and days of perilous travel ensue, Mary's water threatening to break at any minute, and the whole dangerous, exhausting journey is just to fill out some government forms. Imagine that. Compared to this, 2 hours spent languishing in the motor vehicle waiting room seems hardly worth grumbling over, does it? Just to renew our license plates? Historians have reported that they can find little evidence of this, in fact, census, but their search is mostly beside the point. For Luke, you see the mandate from Rome and the journey of the two peasants from Galilee to Judea are not primarily geographical or historical matters, but they are theological ones. The question for Luke is where hope might be found for people like Mary and Joseph. They are like poor and defenseless people everywhere and in every time, at the whim of whatever Caesar or mindless bureaucracy or uncaring machinery of state happens to lash out in their direction. You know that we've already seen some of that with the Latin Americans making their own journey these last number of weeks and months. Caesar issues a decree, drinks another glass of wine, eats a cluster of grapes, and Joseph and Mary, they pack provisions and head out on the Roman road to Judea. In Peter Bruegel's famous painting, The Numbering at Bethlehem, one has to search hard when you look at it to find Mary and Joseph among the village rustics crowding into town. They have disappeared into anonymity of the powerless. The irony is that while Joseph and Mary and their unborn child are headed to Bethlehem to be counted, in fact, they do not count. At least not to Rome, anyway. You see, they are faceless nobodies under the boot of an uncaring empire. Their only hope, if they have any hope at all, is not Caesar Augustus, who commands their trek, but rather in the God of Israel, who accompanies them even when they walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I've been thinking, as North American power and influence increased over the last century, hope has become a casualty. We became more confident of our strength and promise, and we have somehow begun, as North Americans, to imagine ourselves as those who need no hope. Who needs hope, after all, when you have unfettered progress going on around you? Instead, we began to express our longings for the future as hope-nots. I hope the stock market doesn't crash again. It is in the States. I hope my children don't get hooked on drugs. I hope I don't get Alzheimer's when I get old. All expressions of the fact that we were steaming ahead complacently, simply hoping that no icebergs would lay in our path. I wonder if faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, as it says in Hebrews, then we soon lost our faith because the things we could see, hold, and store up were simply more satisfying for us. Having a firm grip on the good life, we no longer needed to open our hands in prayer. In the book Hope Against Hope, theologians Trevor Hart and Richard Buckham observe that societies fueled by progress tend to mark time as the march of the centuries, confident that each new century trumps all the previous ones. A self-assurance that allows one to focus on the continuous forward-moving advance, ignoring the discontinuities and the tragic losses of real history. But now it's virtually impossible to ignore the discontinuities and the tragic losses around us. With economies faltering and glaciers melting and terrorists stalking, with taxes going toward drones and futile wars, and with electronic invasions of privacy by governments, we have at least been disabused of the illusion that we need no hope beyond our own resources. We are now all Joseph and Marys, compelled by some distant Caesar to travel the weary road. But the road leads to Bethlehem, and it leads to a manger of surprising hope which awaits us there. We felt that we had received the sentence of death, writes Paul in 2 Corinthians, so that we would rely not on ourselves, but on the God who raises us from the dead. As the late great theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer compares life in a prison cell to the hope of Advent, he wrote these words in his book. As he sat in that prison cell rotting away, he said, "One waits, hopes, does this, that, or the other things that are really of no consequence. The door is shut and can only be opened from the outside." End of quote. No longer confident of progress, no longer believing Caesar's empty promise of peace, maybe you and I are ready again for the hope and the wonder of this story of Bethlehem. Like Joseph, we are exhausted by the forced march of greedy empires, but like pregnant Mary, we suddenly realize that we have been carrying the true hope inside of us all along, that the Holy One is with us. Listen. Here once again, sounding over Bethlehem, the angels' hopeful song of the only peace in the world worth trusting. I say to you tonight, good friends, as you light a small candle and watch as it sputters, and then flames, and miraculously joins the light of people sitting around you here tonight, and slowly and surely fills this space with light. Remember, always remember in your own life, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not ever overcome the light. So make a place in your heart for that light on this night. Keep it burning tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and all the days ahead in your life. May it be so for you. May it be so for me.